I know you know we talk about race a lot and how it came to be. What do you know about it?
What do I know about race?
Yes.
Race is pretty much where people identify as their culture, their ethnicity, where they come from. You have white race, black race, Mexican race.
But isn't it confusing when it comes to pigment? Because that's literally the only thing that's different. I mean, yes, we grew up in different cultures, but where did race come from? How did it come to be?
When you speak biblical sense, the darker races are credited from coming from the Hamites. Noah had three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham is credited from where the dark races come from. But Shem also had dark races. Where you come into Negroes, am I answering that too early?
No, I mean everything ties in together.
The Negro comes from being a dark race, but not being from the Hamitic line. They come from the Shemitic line.
Would you be able to elaborate on that?
Meaning, the Hamanites were dark races, and so were the Negroes, the Shemites. The Hebrews were just as dark as the Hamanites. The Hamanites are the fathers of the Midianites. The Midianites are the father of the Egyptians. And remember, Moses passed as an Egyptian, so he was just as dark. Midianite means burnt skin. So when you got the Hamanites and the Shemites living together, there had to be a way to distinguish this dark race from that dark race. One dark race was called Negro to distinguish them from the other dark races.
Now, from what I was told in a couple of classes that I took and knowledge from other people when I traveled around the world, that before slavery came to North America, there was a tribe war in Africa. And there was 3 tribes going at war. And there was the biggest tribe, which always won the war, but the other 2 tribes came together to fight that tribe and beat them and make them their slaves. And it was so called that tribe's name was niggas. Not exactly niggas, but it came to be until Americanized into niggers.
So here's what you're doing. What they did was they gave you a little bit of truth with a little bit of falsehood. Negro land, where the Shemites were. Within the Negro land, they had the kingdom of Judah, which was the Yehudans. Okay, the other Africans, which were Hamite, came together with the Arabs and fought against that tribe, which are the original Israelites, and they wanted to get rid of them. So we're still talking Hamite versus Shemite.
Okay.
So the Hamites paired up with the Arabs. Slavery went into Africa first. They were selling these people from what you would consider Negro land to everywhere else, but the Arabs were cruel to their slaves and they killed them.
So, in other words, the word Negro came from Africa originally.
No, it originally came from the Middle East and Canaan. Canaanites, it was in between Egypt and Canaan. The word Negro came from the dark races that were there, that they distinguished themselves from the other dark races.
So they called themselves Negroes.
Yes.
And that was basically how they identified.
Yes.
Was it to call them stupid?
No.
Was it to basically make just
To make fun of them?
Yeah.
It wasn't a derogatory term. It didn't become derogatory until it came to the United States. During the transatlantic slave trade, once they made it over here, that's when it went, because it wasn't Negro, it was Niger, Niger. When they came over here, it was mispronounced, and they added another G. Instead of Niger, they called them Niger, and then Nigger. Niger and Nigger, the same word. So they knew who they were getting. They were getting Hebrew slaves. They weren't getting African slaves. They were getting Hebrew slaves over here. Matter of fact, in John Roth's book, the guy who married Pocahontas, he actually bought the first 17 slaves, and in his book he wrote about them as being Hebrew. The first slaves were Hebrew, and then the rest of the slaves were Hebrew. They weren't African, they were Hebrew.
So why does it come to be that we are African Americans instead of Hebrew Americans?
I have never considered myself African American, ever. I think it's a derogatory term. I think it's stupid to call yourself African American because I'm not an African American. Matter of fact, there ain't no such thing because Africa's a continent. It's so stupid and blind for us to accept that term because you got someone saying, oh, they somewhere over there. They call the whole continent Europe. Or Africa. So all of us are African. That's why there's Nigerian. There's people from South African. There's Igbo. There's different folk.
But why is there still tension between the black people in America and Africa?
Because the Africans sold the black people into slavery. What do you mean? That's self-explanatory. Even now, you go to West Africa and the people who get treated the worst over there are the Igbo. The Igbo tribe, now you asked how come they weren't called Hebrew. They are called Hebrew. It's just being mispronounced. Because when they were first being brought on to the ships, the slave manifest had the first time when they wrote who they got. Because the Africans were selling the Hebrews. And it says here are 273 healthy Hebos. Somebody white mispronounced Hebrew and they spelled Hebos. So once they came over here, somebody's reading it, they mispronounced it again. Instead of saying Hebos, they said Igbo. That's where you get the Igbo. The Igbo people are Hebrew. They're still called to this day Hebrew. They actually had scientists go over there and do DNA tests and found out that they are actual Hebrews from Israel. And then when you look at our slave archives, 98% of the slaves that were brought to the United States are from the Igbo tribe. So if they're of Jewish descent, if they're Hebrews from the tribe of Israel, then that makes 98% of us here in the United States Igbo, which, if it was said right, would be Hebrew.
One more question. So it's still about race. But do you think that if race was literally deleted and we were literally all the same, not the same color, but literally the same, we're just humans, do you believe that would take out a little racism out of this world?
No. Racism doesn't come from color. Racism comes from sin.
Elaborate.
So when you get talking about, oh, we're all human, that's a cop out. That's what white people use, and they started that. We're all human. There's no racist. That's BS. Because we wouldn't have to be in this. We wouldn't be having this conversation if that was true. It's always easy for people to say, oh, we're from the human race, but forget about what's been done to us.